Righteousness and truth grant to our Queen and to our government, to members of the Legislative Assembly, and to all in positions of responsibility, the guidance of your Spirit. May they never lead the province wrongly through love of power, desire to please, or unworthy ideas, but laying aside all private interest and prejudice, keep in mind their responsibility to seek to improve the condition of all. Orders of the day, orders du jour.
Government bills and orders for second reading. Bill 67, Skilled Trades and Apprenticeship Education Act. Adjourned debate. Honourable Mr. Schweitzer.
Honourable members, the Honourable Minister has a few minutes remaining should he choose to use it. Are there others? The Honourable Member for Edmonton North West.
Well, good morning, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to Bill 67, Skilled Trades and Apprenticeship Education Act. And certainly, I think on the broadest sense that this bill is quite promising in regards to talking about apprenticeships, talking about jobs in the economy, and opening up a discussion around post-secondary education here in the province of Alberta. We know that post-secondary holds a key to economic diversification. It holds a key to ensuring that our considerable young population stays and is gainfully employed in the province of Alberta. It's a way by which we can help to invest in each of the communities that are 26 colleges and universities and polytechnics in each of the communities in which they reside. And it's a way, I believe, as well to offer some hope and optimism for economic recovery here in the province of Alberta. And so we know that always a dynamic economy will be evolving and changing over time. This year and this time is no exception. And we have to make sure that we are flexible and responsive to the economic needs of our society and to the interests of our working population and our young population that would be entering the workforce in the coming months and years. And so we see with this particular bill, quite a dramatic change in the framework in which we deal with skilled trades in this apprenticeship education here in the province of Alberta. And I guess that's the reason that I feel at least reasonably optimistic, is that if we do execute this framework in a responsible way, then we would be able to have something we could work with. Now, Mr. Speaker, that being said, there's quite a number of issues and questions that the official opposition and indeed building trades and other people involved in post-secondary education have around this bill. And of course, this is a forum by which we can try to answer some of those questions, which is, I think, can be quite constructive. And I hope that that's exactly what we'll see happen here in the coming hours and days as we debate Bill 67. Certainly, we know that it's important to answer these questions, because it's not as though we don't already have quite a well-established skill and apprenticeship training program here in this province of Alberta through our polytechnic institutions like NAIT and SAIT, as well as the apprenticeship programs that are set up with the various building trades that we have here in the province of Alberta as well. These trade programs are well established. They are as old as this province and even older in some ways. They are connected to international skilled trades apprenticeship programs, from machinists to boilermakers to electricians to carpenters to plumbers and pipe fitters and so forth. And it's important to make sure that we're utilizing all of the best practices and experience and skill that each of these established skilled trades apprenticeship programs have built up over the last years and decades, quite frankly, last century. So, we're here to, as I said, during second reading, talk about the principle of a bill and to find out some specific details so that we can answer those questions, like I said, that are coming from students and from polytechnics and from the skilled trades around the province. So, as far as I can see, Mr. Speaker, this bill is repealing the Apprenticeship and Industry Training Act as it established, and is establishing a new act for training and regulating for education here in the province. It's an enabling framework, so as I said, it has a lot to do with what we put into that vessel that would be created if this bill does get passed. As far as I can tell, it is a less prescriptive and detailed requirement here set in legislation than what we had before. It seems to maintain a degree of transparency and accountability, and does clarify authorities assigned with expertise, defining apprenticeships and establishing a governance framework. Some of the things that I find intriguing that I will ask now and further during debate is, I know that this bill is interested in expanding what we could consider to be a trade, so that perhaps we are including some technology programming, some technology training, and others. And I'd be curious to know, what direction these new trade categories in which way may be going. Some of the other questions that I have, that my colleagues have as well, is that, we want to ensure that that we maintain the standards that apprenticeships have within the province of Alberta, but also so that they are meshing with the standards of practice from international trades as well, such as, like I said before, the machinists or boilermakers. They have an interprovincial standard of trade. Okay, there you go. Yeah, it's important to listen to this. They have so many trades in Fort McMurray. I think it's a good place to probably listen, or at least lower your voice when you're chit-chatting while I'm talking, right? Brings back that old feeling I have as a teacher where I stare at the people, but of course they don't pay attention, so that doesn't matter, right? There you go. Whatever. Anyway, so, to make sure that we are integrating the trades programs that we have with interprovincial standards and international standards as well. Because if you don't have those, of course, then, we don't want to be out of scope and out of sequence with, let's say, the standard of apprenticeship, journeyman programs that, happen in Saskatchewan or in Texas or in so forth. And we have a lot of interaction between our workers moving between those jurisdictions as well. So we've got to make sure we are not out of step with those standards. Another question I think that we all need to look at carefully is to make sure, the reason that we have such high uptake in apprenticeship programs in the province of Alberta and why we have such a high rate of employment is because you have a very close relationship where industry is talking to our polytechnics and getting clear information about how many skilled trades people they will perceive to need in the coming months and years, right? And so they set that standard, they set a quota for, how many, let's say, boilermaker positions they have at NAIT here in Edmonton. And then, that moves through the system and, more often than not, then you have quite high employment rates coming out of the other side. Another reason, of course, we have such high uptake with apprenticeship programs is that, of course, the programs are integrated with working so that people get paid as they are learning the trade. And I think it's absolutely essential that we maintain that expectation and that system to have people go to school and stay in school and earning money while they learn the trade over a 2-year or 4-year or 5-year period. If we in any way compromise or interrupt that somehow where you have an apprenticeship program without that paid and work experience element, then again, you're compromising a system that works, that ensures that it attracts people to enroll in a trade program because they have a family to feed and bills to pay and so forth, and still getting a training dividend at the end and a certificate. I know that this bill seems to be talking about making sure that these people can get credits in a much broader way for training from a polytechnic or a university or another skilled program. And again, I think that this is a promising idea. I know that, working with high school students and having high school programs with the ability to attain credit for a program while you're still in high school was showing a lot of promise over the last few years. I know as minister, I could see in various places around the province, people getting, let's say, training as a nursing attendant while still in high school, building up those credits that were then recognized at a college, and the kids were already well on their way to getting that certificate and getting that job that we need. And so I know as well, though, that that kind of programming doesn't come cheap, right? It's not as though you can say, hey, well, we'll let businesses pick up that other piece of it. A lot of that apprenticeship style program reaching into high schools really fell away when the economy was experiencing difficulty during the economic downturn from 2013, 2014. A lot of those partnerships with high school programs fell away because the business side couldn't perhaps maintain or afford them. And so, my point is this, Mr. Speaker, that you don't just put these kinds of programs on paper and say you're going to expand apprenticeships, you're going to, do all of these things without putting resources behind them as well. Money. It's important to do that because, of course, when you're establishing something new, you have to make sure that people recognize that it is being supported in the broadest possible way. I couldn't help notice, again, we had two colleges recently getting polytechnic degree granting status here in the province of Alberta, Red Deer College and Grand Prairie College, which people were pretty happy about, right? They wanted for a full university, but they got that level of polytechnic, that's fine. But then you turn around and notice that those same two colleges, Red Deer College and Grand Prairie College, were being cut more than almost any other post-secondary institution over the last 2 years than anywhere in Alberta. So you have, this idea that we're going to start a new program, and then also you're pulling the rug under the feet of those same institutions by cutting them by 15% or more with their operating budgets. So my point is, Mr. Speaker, of course, we can, great purveyor and producer of grand words and schemes and bills, and we can talk about these things and high-minded ideals of post-secondary education, but if we don't put money where the mouth is of the government, then all of these things are just words and not substantive. So I guess we'll be watching for that as well with Bill 67 to make sure that this is actually being resourced in a reasonable way. So I think that those are some of the broad strokes that I'm looking for. Again, I would suggest to the government, modestly and humbly, that maybe Bill 67 is a good way to turn the corner on commitment to post-secondary education here in the province of Alberta. There's a huge appetite for it, Mr. Speaker, from north to south, east to west, to make an investment in post-secondary. There is a cohort of young people right now that are in grade school, right? Many tens of thousands more than ever before. We can see it. We've built 200 new schools for them. Those schools were all full. Within a few years, Mr. Speaker, they will need post-secondary positions. If they don't have those post-secondary positions here in the province of Alberta, and if those post-secondary positions in Alberta are unaffordable due to massive tuition increases, then those students will simply leave or not go to school. So those are decisions and choices.
The thing that I can't help notice this morning is the silky soft sounds of the jackhammer outside, but
those Tibetan prayer horns, or something is drilling into the side of the
that is exactly
legislature.
correct.
I don't know if the sergeant at arms.
Standing Order 29-2A is available if anyone has a brief question or comment for the member for Edmonton Northwest. Seeing none, are there others wishing to join in the debate? The Honourable, the member for Edmonton West, Henday.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to rise this morning to speak to Bill 67, the Skilled Trades and Apprenticeship Education Act. And at first glance, as the previous speaker mentioned, I think that we see some opportunities within this legislation. I think that every opportunity we have to talk about the expansion of apprenticeship programs and ensuring that we have adequate spaces and opportunities in training, that we take those opportunities to discuss that. And so what we see here, and the idea that we expand some of these programs to be offered in different ways than we traditionally have, is overall, I think in principle, something that I am relatively supportive of, but there's definitely a lot of questions that I have related to Bill 67, primarily about the administration or changes to administration of courses and programmings. And I appreciate again the previous member and his role as the minister in education specifically. And when we look at the idea of the registered apprenticeship program being offered through high school, I think that those are incredible opportunities that we have to get students started on a successful path to a promising career. Now, with that being said, I think that there's a lot of conversations that we need to be having about the future of trades when we talk about expanding opportunities and ensuring that there's work for those students moving forward. Of course, we've seen over the last 2 or so years since this new government has come into power that unfortunately, with the promises that they've made to Albertans and to working families in our community, that a lot of those promises haven't come to fruition, specifically around jobs and opportunities for those in the trades. And I'm hopeful that once we're able to move forward past the pandemic, that many of our workers will be able to get back on the job. But the fact is, when I look at my own union, IBW 424, that a large majority of those people are still out of work and are looking for work. And so any time we're talking about indenturing new people into those trades, we should also be talking about are there opportunities for those workers on the other side of that education? Now, again, we heard some very good points from the previous speaker. The idea that with these changing opportunities for the administration and the administration of the programs that are offered by, well, right now, primarily post-secondary institutions, but with the changes that we see in Bill 67, potentially by other associations or private organizations, I definitely have questions specific to the idea that we've heard from this government around performance-based funding for post-secondaries. It's no secret that the UCP has talked previously about the idea that post-secondary institutions should be getting funding potentially based on whether people are getting jobs on the other side. And so when we talk about expanding the opportunities for other organizations beside post-secondary institutions to offer apprenticeship training, I have to question what that is going to mean for their funding model and the amount of money that they are receiving as institutions if we see a major shift of how these programs are being offered, how they are being administered. And I can appreciate the current system that we have, and I'm sure there's always opportunities to strengthen the process that's currently in place, and that is what the government is promising through Bill 67, the Skill Trades and Apprenticeship Education Act 2021. Now, when I had the opportunity to go through the beginning process of my apprenticeship, and I went to NATE for the first technical aspect, the first technical training process, and I have nothing but great things to say about the programs that they were offering through that process. It was hands-on. I had every opportunity to learn, not only from a textbook, but in the classroom, and really it prepared me to move forward with that apprenticeship. Now, what we're seeing through this is potentially a difference in, again, how those programs are going to be administered. And so right now, while we have I had the opportunity to gather, over 1,000 hours before I went into NATE, and I know that currently there is some other opportunities, potentially going to school first even, I believe, and then getting some of that hands-on training. And I just wonder how this might change if we see organizations other than what we've traditionally seen so far offering some of these courses, and how that training might change. And so it's definitely something that I will be keeping an eye on as this process moves forward. Again, when we look at the current system, when I went to school, I paid for the costs up front, as far as I remember, and after successfully finishing the program, I was able to be reimbursed for the funding that I had initially paid for. And I think that's an important component, that we are doing our best to support students no matter what program they're in. And unfortunately, what we've seen from this government is quite the opposite. We've seen not only in the trades the costs of getting education going up, but even more so potentially in our degree offering programs, that these programs have went up by thousands of dollars per semester even. And further to that, we've seen the costs of paying those loans back in terms of the interest on these loans actually raised because of the decisions of this UCP government, which is incredibly unfortunate and frustrating, as we are considering opportunities to diversify our economy, to expand our economy and expand the knowledge that the students and the people in our province have. When we talk about keeping people here instead of them leaving, potentially even right out of high school, we need to be considering these costs and also the process of how we are administering these programs. And so we've seen, even in BC, as they move forward on the removal of compulsory trade designations, that completion rates for these programs actually declined, as did the wages for those workers that were completing those programs. And so I have to question whether the government has watched these trends, if the government has done a cross-jurisdictional analysis on what they are proposing in this legislation, and if they have, what results they saw of that. Is it the case that, as we've seen in BC, that completion rates are expected to decline? Or if not, what is the government doing to combat what we've seen in BC and potentially other jurisdictions? So I hope that we can get some answers around that. We also see that a lot of what is being proposed in here is actually, or what is not, I suppose, being proposed in here is going to be left up to regulations. And I always have to question whether that is the best decision when we are in the House debating this piece of legislation before us, whether we should have the full picture of what is being proposed or not. Because when we talk about the administration of these programs, the board structure of these programs, and some of the decisions that are being left to regulations, it's hard for us to make decisions when we don't have the full picture in front of us. And we've seen this again and again from this government, where we are told to trust them, that in principle we should support the bill, but often the body of the legislation or the majority of the decisions that are going to be made are actually left to regulations, which is, again, very hard for us as legislators to make decisions through that process and based on that process. We see that this legislation appears to do away with provincial and local committee structures. Also waters down the role of the board and the trades it purports to grow. And so I just question again how this is actually going to improve the apprenticeship process and the trade opportunities in our province if those trades don't actually have a seat at the table. Because again, this is a piece, as far as I can tell, that is largely going to be left, the board structures potentially, to regulations, and so we're expected to agree to potentially these structures without fully understanding or seeing how they are going to be administered. We see that under the current legislation, just on this point again, that input and oversight from the employer and employee perspectives is equal throughout the board and provincial and local apprenticeship committees. So again, I question these changes or how the government came to the conclusion that these were the right decisions to make based on what they've seen potentially here. If the board structure wasn't working, why they have proposed to see such a drastic change to those boards. If they feel that it's not working, then we definitely need some answers on that. Again, when we look at Section 2 in the definition, it discusses the idea of sponsors that can be entities beyond normal employers to provide these apprenticeships. One example, of course, being unions, and I believe that we see opportunities for that to already be taking place, and I think that overall it is a successful process. After all, these are people who understand the trades, understand the apprenticeship program quite thoroughly. I would argue to some of the highest levels. And so I can appreciate any opportunity that we have to allow, again, more apprenticeships to be taking place, for more opportunities for education to be taking place, that we should definitely be considering and be discussing them. But again, I would love clarification on if the process of offering those programs is going to change, if the traditional way of potentially gathering a couple thousand hours and then going to school, or potentially going to school on the front end and then gathering a couple thousand hours, if there's going to be even further changes or opportunities from that based on where an apprentice decides to go, whether they go to an institution or potentially go to an entity outside of those traditional organizations. There, Mr. Speaker, as you might appreciate, there is a lot to take in from this, and I understand that we are primarily looking at this bill in principle and hoping to gather some feedback on that, but there is just so many questions left to be addressed. And so I really hope that we hear some more information and clarification from the minister. I apologize if maybe I've asked some questions that have potentially been addressed, but I'm always happy to be corrected and get further clarification on that. Through our conversations, we have heard concerns that the removal of compulsory designated trades that we're seeing in this legislation, again, could be moving towards a similar system as we've seen in BC, and are very concerned about the idea that we might see lower completion rates because of that, and might see reduced wages in the trades. That's always a concern. We also see that work site injuries in BC also outpace other jurisdictions. So again, when we are talking about how we're offering these programs, I want reassurances that the safety aspect is not going to be put into jeopardy, that the training around that safety and opportunities to ensure that the education is in line with what we've seen already is going to continue through the process that is being proposed by this bill, Bill 67. And so I look forward to hearing more discussions on this. Again, we're seeing some major changes in how the model is going to work for Albertans, in the board structure, in the educational administration of this process, of who's going to be allowed to administer these programs outside of the traditional scope of what we've seen here in Alberta. And Mr. Speaker, again, in principle, I'm happy to support anything that talks about increasing apprenticeship opportunities, increasing job opportunities for Albertans. But when we look at the history of this government, again, whether we're talking about trades, whether we're talking about degree programs, that this government has put up a lot of hurdles for post-secondary institutions to be able to be successful into the future. We're seeing entire programs being cut up across the province and across all industries, and we are seeing entire administrative boards within the institutions being amalgamated, for many times from double digits down to single digits, and that's always concerning when we talk about removing the amount of people that are supporting students through these programs, removing opportunities to have those experts at the table. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Standing Order 29-2A, if anyone has a brief question or comment. Seeing none. The Honourable Member for Edmonton, Castle Downs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to rise this morning to speak to Bill 67, the Skilled Trades and Apprenticeship Education Act 2021. I can tell you that I'm pretty familiar with the trades. My oldest son is a fourth-generation journeyman insulator. Comes from a family of working in oil and gas in the trades, and was successful in getting his education through NAIT right here in Edmonton. And I can tell you that it was a really good process for him, because the insulators were actually the ones in NAIT that were teaching the trade. When he would do his apprenticeship in the field and then come in and do his schooling at NAIT in the West End, it was people that actually did the work that were teaching that skill that he had to bring out into the field. And so when we look at this legislation, there is the potential that the minister can dictate who is responsible for that education, that certification. So I'm curious if any of the skilled trades, and I say skilled because they're very skilled in what they do. It's very specific work that they do. And my expectation would be that those that are teaching it are trained in it. That's something that simply makes sense. My background is social work. I can't imagine doing my field placement with a social worker and then going to school and learning from an accountant who believes in social work, who has an interest for whatever reason, was appointed by a minister because perhaps that's their friend, but really knows nothing about social work. I would question, as a professional, under my ethics, what am I learning? Am I truly learning what social work is? I want to learn from someone that has that hands-on experience. All of my professors were social workers. I take students now from the social work programs that are offered all across the province, whether it's a diploma, a bachelor's, a master's, and they all come from an education that is based in social work. Their professors are social workers because they're learning how to do social work. So to look at this piece of legislation that says there could be a certificate requirement that is governed by someone who perhaps is not in that trade is very concerning. What gives them the expertise and the skill required to educate on a skilled trade? I think when we look at the different opportunities that this government could have taken to talk to those that are involved in the trades and apprenticeship, I'm curious who they consulted with. I know when we were in government and I was the military liaison for the province, we worked very closely with the military, specifically the Helmets to Hard Hats program, that looked at those that were part of the armed forces, whether it was regular or reserves, who are skilled in their trade. So whether they're carpenters, whether they're plumbers, they're educated within the military program. And this program, called the Helmets to Hard Hats, works with the unions and the skilled trades to ensure that their members can transition from military into civilian life with the same career. We know that that communication was essential because the military wanted to ensure that their members, when they retire, were eligible to continue their trade in their province. That was something that I'm very proud of the work that we did. We saw many members transition from being an active member to a retired member, still working in their profession. It was an area that we discussed quite a bit at Seamless Canada. So as the Alberta representative, I was able to sit with all the other provinces and territories, with the representative and the military, to talk about what some of the barriers are when our members are moving from province to province, not just for the member, but for their spouses and for their children. Education came up because each province has a different standard of education. Trades was one of the top things that came up because each province has different regulations. So when this piece of legislation was being discussed, was the military or Seamless Canada taken into consideration to talk about ways that we can improve the transition process for our skilled trades workers? They would be a very important voice to be at that table when we talk about who's giving the training, what are the requirements. Through the Helmets to Hard Hats program, the trades in Alberta were able to look at what the military offered, the training that they received. So on top of being, let's say, a plumber, They also received combat training. They also received first aid training. They have certificate upon certificate that goes above and beyond what the expectation is for the Alberta plumber. So how they work to make them compatible so that the member can easily transition was something that took a lot of work between the government and the military, the provincial government and the military. So when they're making these changes, were they consulted with? It's a transition program that works very well. There's still areas of improvement when it comes to cross-jurisdictional qualifications. Are they looking at other provinces to see how they do it? Is this something that another province does? Could this potentially discourage plumbers from wanting to do their education in Alberta? Because if they're going to go to school in, let's say, Ontario, where they know that they're going to be taught by a plumber, not someone that the minister appointed to give that education, would they choose Alberta to come if they're not confident in their education system to be able to do their job? I think by saying that anybody could potentially do the education really causes a lot of doubt in how this government feels about our trades. It's taking away that skilled component of it. It's right in their title, skilled trades. To me, that means someone skilled should be teaching what it means to be in that trade. And as a result, you will have a skilled worker at the end of that education. To take it away from those that are currently doing the work the way that it's set up now causes a lot of questions. I know that there's a lot of research that has been done about women in the trades. We see the program Women Building Futures. So this is a program that its whole purpose is to get more women involved in the trades. But we also see a barrier that women go through the program, they complete their apprenticeship, and there's a disconnect between those that are completing it to those that are actually entering the field. Is that been applied to this piece of legislation? Are we looking at what some of those barriers are? Does this piece of legislation improve outcomes for women? Is there something in here that says that they've talked with the Women Building Futures program to discuss what sort of educational needs perhaps are missing, or what sort of employment barriers there are? I don't see anything in this. So if we're talking about wanting to get Albertans back to work and creating jobs, I see this as a hurdle, Mr. Speaker. I don't see anything in here that talks about the women specifically. That has to be a lens that's applied when there's specific programs targeting women with successful outcomes in the trades. We know that these are good paying jobs, mortgage paying jobs. There's structures that are set up that will allow Albertans to come out of this with a ticket. But I'm not seeing how this piece of legislation actually accomplishes that. I'm concerned that there's many questions that are outstanding. Who was talked to? Who was consulted? I know when we're looking at education in this province, we've seen what they've done with the curriculum and the outrage from K to 12. We've seen the attacks that they've done on post-secondary with skyrocketing tuition rates. What's happening with these decisions is that people are leaving the province for their education. So I know, talking to people in the trades, that they're not comfortable thinking that someone who's not a skilled tradesman would be training them in their education. It just simply doesn't make sense. Another question that I have is, I have a student child who's in grade 12. And so him and his friends are obviously contemplating what their next steps are. Those big pressure things that are happening for students in grade 12. What am I going to do with the rest of my life? Some of them were fortunate enough to go through programs through high school that actually allowed them to become apprentices, that actually gave them the skills needed to become mechanics or to become electricians. They did it right in high school. They started that journey knowing that that was going to be their career path. And I'm curious if this registered apprentice program will be affected. There's a really wonderful system currently in place that supports our high school students to become apprentices. Is it going to be impacted with this? I know my son is looking at becoming a plumber. And these are questions that he has, like, who am I going to be learning from, Mom? Am I going to be learning from people who actually work in the trade? Or am I going to be learning from someone who likes the trade, maybe has some teaching background, which is wonderful, but is it someone that's actually going to be able to give me that hands-on experience, education, when I need it? My son's a hands-on learner. That's where he does his best learning, by actually doing. And so that's part of what the apprentice education is. You're in a classroom setting, but you're actually doing the work. You're using the tools, you're getting familiar with them. And if you have someone that's never held a wrench, teaching you how to access pipe, what does that look like? You can read it in a book, but I can tell you from firsthand experience, Mr. Speaker, that I've tried to do things on my own, some maintenance things around the house, and quickly learned that after watching a YouTube video, I'm not actually a skilled tradesperson. And I could possibly do more damage to my sink or to my toilet or whatever it was I thought I could do. So when we're talking about our future, it's concerning that this government talks about jobs, jobs, jobs. We're not seeing anything in their legislation or in their plan that's actually going to get people back to work. Many people are looking at having to come up with a new career. We have tradespeople all over this province that have been laid off. COVID has impacted so many people. And so what are they doing? They're looking at schooling as an opportunity to change their career. They're looking in the trades. They're looking at those jobs that potentially could create a new career path for them. I've talked in this House at length about the comparison between the film and TV industry and oil and gas. There's so many skills that are transferable between the two industries. Is this something that this government is talking about? Have they talked to the film industry when they talk about their driller or their derrickman that can do that work on a film set that isn't working? How can we get that person into the trades? What is an easy transition to them? They have the skills, they don't have the title, they don't have that education or the apprenticeship needed for that, but it makes it an easy transition because they already know how to do that work. So when we have people that are so skilled, like gaffers and grips, makeup, hair, props, set directors, all of those things, lights, people that come in and set up a crew. We have heavy machinery operators that come in and set up a set. That same work is being done in oil and gas. Are we looking at ways that those individuals can transfer? Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Standing Order 29-2A is available. On Standing Order 29-2A, the Honourable Member for Edmonton City Centre.
My colleague from Edmonton Castle Downs was just cut off mid-sentence, so I just wanted to see if she had a final thought she'd like to complete.
For Edmonton Castle Downs.
Thank you to my colleague for allowing me a little bit more time to talk about this. I know that this isn't a new concept that's being introduced to this government. In November November 18th, 2019 specifically, I did a member statement from an individual who worked both in the oil and gas and in the film industry. He was a derrickman who worked on a drilling rig and a prop man for the film Unforgiven that were both here in Alberta. And he easily made the connection between the two trades and questioned why this government isn't looking at film and looking at oil and gas, who we saw a decline in employment, and looking at the comparisons and how easily their jobs relate. They're using the same set of skills. When this government looked at the skilled trades and apprenticeship education, I'm curious if this conversation occurred. If they talked about ways to take an already existing training and offer different training that is comparable to allow more Albertans to get back to work. They might have been trained in oil and gas, and perhaps if this government had actually supported the film industry, they could be employed in the film industry. We've had so many people around this province, skilled, hardworking Albertans, that want to be part of the solution. They want to be able to be at the table with government to help get Albertans back to work. The film industry is a prime example of wanting to be part of that discussion, part of that innovation, part of that diversification. And we're looking at skilled trades. This would have been the perfect opportunity to allow for those individuals to have some sort of voice at the table. So when we're talking about who they actually spoke to, when it comes to the education and the apprenticeship, are they thinking outside of the box? Are they thinking about individuals in this province that are very skilled in one career that could easily transition into another, but there aren't opportunities to do so? We've seen programs that have been creative in ways of looking at skills that perhaps could be transferable. So we see people with multiple tickets because they're on the work site and they see another journeyman doing a trade that perhaps has comparable skills. Is it easy for them to transition into another trade? Do they want to because of the cost now of tuition, or perhaps that they're not going to be trained as their colleague was? Because we don't know where that education is coming from. We don't know who's overseeing it. We question who has been talked to. Have the actual professions that are being impacted had a voice at the table? Have they talked to the insulators? Have they talked to the engineers? I know that there's many, many Albertans around this province that are eager to help. They want to be helped. It's concerning that this legislation gives the power to the minister to create apprentice and industry programs and the related credentials. How is the minister skilled, as per this title, to know all of the different trades that are out there and what makes sense? We have so many in this province that are saying, we want to help, will you include us at the table? I don't see who they've consulted with. I don't see this when it comes to this piece of legislation. I don't see anything in here that speaks to the work that's already being done. Is that going to be erased? Is there still going to be a relationship with the Helmets to Hard Hats program? Is there going to be a relationship with the Women Building Futures? Is there going to be relationships with the high schools that are currently doing great work supporting students getting into the trades? All of that consultation is so essential because there's work that's already being done. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I thank you and I will cede my time.
Honourable members, the Honourable Member for Edmonton, Beverly Clairview on second reading.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to rise today and speak to Bill 67, the Skilled Trades Apprenticeship Education Act 2021. I appreciate comments that my colleagues have made this morning, some great questions that have been asked around this bill. We recognize, I recognize and we recognize at the onset that acts like this one need to be updated and refreshed from time to time. And so there's a number of positive things in this bill that I think are worthy of supporting. I do have some questions as far as other parts of it that I'll get into this morning here, Mr. Speaker. And so, first and foremost, we know that apprenticeships are incredibly important. We know that trades are also equally important. I think far too often members on the government side talk about how they feel like the trades are less valued than another post-secondary degree. We don't feel that way. We feel that they're all equally valuable. We need the trades. We need folks getting university degrees as well. And so it's not an either or. I think really, this is about providing Albertans with as many options as possible to pursue whatever careers that they want to. And we know that we have incredibly skilled trades in our province. In fact, I would argue that here in Alberta, our tradespeople are the best in the country, quite frankly. So this legislation, by providing providing new definitions, opening it up, I think is a positive thing. Again, I have questions around how decisions are going to be made. I know that much of this legislation is a framework, which is enabling legislation, which is not a bad thing for this, so that, again, while we open up this piece of legislation and refresh it, if it wasn't enabling legislation, the risk is that in 2 years from now, we need to open it up again. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, when I read articles and papers that talk about the future of work, it's fascinating that in a few years from now, there will be jobs that do not exist today because of the pace of technology, the pace of development. So that's fascinating. So I think it is important that government look to how they can try to, I don't want to say get ahead of the game, but at least keep pace. I mean, part of the challenge is that often legislation lags behind the reality of our situations because it's ever changing and ever evolving. So providing a framework is great. There are always questions and concerns when the bulk of the meat and potatoes is left to regulation, because regulations are all done by orders in council, which is cabinet, behind closed doors. It's not debated in public. There's no opportunity for Albertans to participate. There's no opportunity for oversight from the opposition. And so that's always a bit of a concern. And quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, we've been reaching out, and my colleagues have had numerous conversations with folks from the different trades. We heard from my colleague who is a member of IBEW and others that are trying to get feedback from the trades themselves as far as what their thoughts on this bill, what they like, what they don't like. And that's important, Mr. Speaker. The one thing that I want to say, yes, this bill is positive in that it's a framework. It's expanding the scope and definition of trades. But I think what Albertans need to remember is this is another example of the UCP hitting the gas and the brake at the same time. So in the past 2 years, they've stripped hundreds of millions of dollars out of our post-secondary system. Hundreds of millions of dollars. And in the same breath, turn around and say, look at all these great things that we're doing, but you've just taken a ton of money out of the system. It's I mean, contradictory is the gentle way of framing this. I mean, there's some that would frame it as hypocritical, but the point is, it's the opposite of what they should be doing. We see similar examples when the government loves to talk about when Alberta is able to attract companies and investments into our province, which is positive. Especially when we look at examples like Infosys, of companies that are technology companies that come and are very, very clear with Albertans. They are coming here for quality of life and for the talent. Well, Mr. Speaker, let's talk about talent for a minute. Where does that talent come from? It can come from people that are self-taught, for sure. I mean, the definition of talent and the scope of talent has changed. It's not just from traditional universities, colleges, and institutions, but the bulk of talent does come through our post-secondary system. So when the UCP government cuts our post-secondaries, they're actually shrinking the talent pipeline, which will have an adverse effect, and it will be a disincentive for these companies to relocate to Alberta or to locate in Alberta. And so that's on the one hand, saying, look, we understand this is important. Okay, well then, as a colleague of mine said, put your money where your mouth is. If it's important, then make those critical investments and grow the talent pipeline. So you have an example here where there's some positive changes being made, but without the funding to go with them, Alberta is falling behind. And shrinking the talent pipeline is the opposite of what we should be doing, especially as the world moves to a more knowledge-based economy. If the government was serious about diversification and not just putting up billboards along highways, then they would make some of these critical investments and recognize that we need to plant the seeds today for these good news stories, tomorrow and down the road. Again, the example of Infosys, that company was courted by the previous government, along with our strong partners of Calgary Economic Development and the City of Calgary and others. On the front page of that story, when it broke that Infosys was coming to Calgary, it was very clear that it had taken years to get to that announcement. And so my point is that, if we want more good news stories like that, which we do, then we need to make these critical investments. And we need to send the right signals out in the world, because everyone is competing, Mr. Speaker. And currently, Alberta is still lagging behind other jurisdictions on these critical investments that will turn into good news stories, jobs, and wins for the province that, of course, we all want to see, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I other questions that I'll get into, but I need to be conscious of my time. I actually would like to move an amendment at this point in time, if I may.
Honourable Member, if you just, you can go ahead, please, Paige. If you pass that to the page, we'll get a copy and then we'll proceed once the table has the originals.
Yes.
referred to as Amendment REF1. The Honourable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will read this into the record for the benefit of those following online or at home. My colleague, the member for Edmonton-McClung, move that the motion for second reading of Bill 67, Skilled Trades and Apprenticeship Education Act, be amended by deleting all the words after that and substituting the following. Bill 67, Skilled Trades and Apprenticeship Education Act, be not now read a second time, but that the subject matter of the bill be referred to the Standing Committee on Alberta's Economic Future in accordance with Standing Order 74.2. Now, Mr. Speaker, the purpose of this...
For interrupting, just wanted to double check to see if the Honourable Member was able to provide an electronic copy to the table via email, or if perhaps someone from the team could do that during your remarks. As should there be a recorded division, we'll also provide this to those who are joining us remotely. The Honourable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Absolutely appreciate the reminder. I think my colleague, our whip, is in the process of actioning that request. So, Mr. Speaker, if members are, I guess, questioning why we're bringing forward this referral amendment, in light of the fact that we are supportive of elements and aspects of this bill, again, this is only sending it to committee for a few more conversations around some of the content in this bill. As I stated earlier in my comments, Mr. Speaker, a lot of important details are being left to regulation, and so we feel, as Her Majesty's official opposition, that we should take the time to hear from more Albertans on to make sure that we get this right. Now, I hope that the government appreciates that as much as possible, we should not only hear different perspectives and opinions, but try to get legislation right the first time. I've been in this chamber long enough to either be a part of or to watch governments of all different political stripes have to reintroduce bills or amend bills that they just amended not long ago. I'd be the first to admit that we did that as government. I know that this current government has done that already, and that previous governments have done that. And so, you know, the challenge with introducing legislation when you make a mistake or you leave something out or something needs to be amended is that it's very time consuming. And again, you know, we want to make sure that we get this right the first time so that we're not unnecessarily taking up time from all members and the offices and folks that support us in this chamber. So we know that this bill is going to set an important framework for apprenticeships and for the skills development in the province. And we know that this bill incorporates many of the recommendations from the Skills for Jobs Task Force. So I do want to thank the members that sat on that committee that worked with industry and with our post-secondaries in order to bring forward a series of recommendations that we do see many of them reflected in this bill. But I can't stand here, Mr. Speaker, and definitively tell Albertans and my constituents that all of the recommendations from that task force have been included in this bill. And so I would like to have the opportunity to confirm with all affected stakeholders that everything that needs to be in here is in this bill. And so by sending it to committee, we're not starting from scratch. We're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. What we're saying is let's just slow this down and bring some folks in to ensure that we didn't miss anything and that we get it right the first time. You know, it makes me think of a brilliant company out of Calgary where their acronym is DIRT, and it's called Doing It Right the First Time. And they use a bunch of technology to build and design houses and physical spaces, but they have no waste they've really taken, the Toyota lean system and implemented it, where, in a traditional construction of a building, there are lots of odds and ends, pieces that get thrown out and scraps. And so this company, DIRT, ensures that by being precise, they only use what they need. It's actually a brilliant concept. I encourage members to check out this company. I digress, Mr. Speaker. And so I hope that members can support this amendment. Let's get it right the first time and support Albertans. Thank you.
Standing Order 29-2A is available. I see the Honourable, not on Standing Order 29-2A. Are there others wishing to speak? The Honourable Associate Minister of Red Tape Reduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be quick as I speak about this motion, this amendment. Mr. Speaker, this bill is really about being able to provide a parity of esteem for our skilled trades. We know that there are people who can get a trade and that can do very well in this world. And as we took a look at the importance of this bill, we recognized that someone going to a university degree in Alberta, for some strange reason, they seem to have a belief that that is better than someone going into the trades. This bill is about being able to provide that parity of esteem for those who are in the trades. And this is a good thing, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure exactly what the member from Edmonton, Beverly, Clearview was talking about when he said we get it right. I thought that the NDP would be 100% behind this. In fact, to be clear, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member from Edmonton Northwest, prior to the Edmonton Beverly Clearview MLA, got up and talked about how good this bill was and how this had gotten it right, and how this was the type of bill that he felt like he would be able to support. Now, I find it interesting that a member from the same caucus over there says one thing and the other says another. This is certainly what we expect from the NDP, and so they probably needed to get together and talk about what their strategy was going to be. But, Mr. Speaker, let's call a spade a spade. What the honourable member from Edmonton, Beverly, Clearview has done here is he has said, let's try to stall a good piece of legislation. And this is really what this is, Mr. Speaker, is a stall tactic that the NDP are using in order to be able to stall a good piece of legislation that will be able to provide the parity of esteem for our tradespeople in Alberta. I think it's interesting that the NDP constantly talk about being one for the unions, and yet this is one where they're not being one for the unions. So, Mr. Speaker, I would recommend that all members of this House vote this down, and let's get on with the business of this House.
Standing Order 29-2A is available if anyone has a brief question or comment for the Minister. On the amendment, REF1, the Honourable Member for Edmonton City Centre.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is laughable that the Associate Minister would suggest there is an issue because there are a variety of thoughts amongst our caucus. After the circus we have seen with the governing party in the last few weeks, in the midst of a pandemic, risking the lives of Albertans because they are fighting amongst themselves, I'll thank the Associate Minister for that hearty laugh this morning. Speaking to the amendment. Now, the Minister also, or pardon me, Associate Minister, also suggested, without reference, without any sort of verification, without any actual proof, that members on this side of the House have had some sort of a condescending or elitist attitude towards the trades, despite the fact that members of our caucus, while we were in government, indeed worked in those trades, proudly supported the unions that were part of that work. And we, in fact, invested in supporting trades, in apprenticeship programs, in training programs in high school, in many other levels. So I would suggest to the Associate Minister and his colleagues that if they want to debate this bill, let's in fact debate it based on reality and not their insistence on trying to conjure up elitism because they feel that they have to have a culture war rather than actually talking about the benefits of their bill. And that is why we have this amendment in front of us. Because indeed, there are aspects of this bill that are good and valuable. The intent behind bringing forward this bill, we absolutely support. And indeed, this legislation dates back to 1991, and so there is good reason for it to be reviewed and updated. The question is, have they gotten it right? Because to be clear, Mr. Speaker, this is a government that has a track record so far in their 2 years of existence of breaking systems in the name of efficiency, innovation, claiming that they're going to cut costs, but instead often making situations far worse, having to scramble to repair the damage that they have done, and often then that ends up being at significant loss for Albertans, and indeed often increased costs. So I think there is good reason to have careful consideration of the bill that is in front of us as they're proposing a significant change to how apprenticeships are operated in the province of Alberta, a significant expansion of how they might go about, and significant changes to the systems that will govern how that goes. That is why we have the amendment in front of us, suggesting that this be referred to a committee, not because we disagree with the principle, not because we disagree with the intent, because we are not convinced that this government has got it right. Let's just think, Mr. Speaker, about what has happened with our healthcare system. This government, of course, immediately struck a panel to look into costs in the province with a target painted very clearly on the healthcare system. Pretty much broadcasted what they were going to come out with, and then the report came out, and indeed they have moved forward. And what we have seen with this government insisting on forcing through some of these very changes, even in the midst of a global pandemic, is that it has come at significant cost to the people of Alberta. We have seen significant pressure on our healthcare system, and indeed now we are seeing closures at rural healthcare sites, like Elk Point, which now does not have doctors on Tuesdays or Thursdays in their emergency department for the foreseeable future, or the closure of the Galahad Care Center this week, because this government did not think through its insistence on pursuing an ideological agenda that disrupted a system. Now, I'm seeing less ideology here in this legislation. Of course, there's much to be laid out in the regulation. And there's certainly plenty of room for the government to pursue, shall we say, some ill-advised directions based on its imagined idea that there is some sort of elitism amongst Albertans in regards to the trades. I think also of what this government did with our tech industry. Again, coming in based on ideology, immediately just raising the earth in terms of supports and incentives for the tech industry in Alberta. Now, in that case, they struck their panel afterwards to try, because they already realized just after having done it that they had already done incredible damage. And my hat is off to the tech industry for having made their voices heard and made sure they got at the table to make recommendations to this government after they again disrupted a system that had been working and functioning, had begun to generate good returns for the province of Alberta. Thank goodness that the resilience and the hard work of folks in the industry and the advocates in Calgary and other areas, the City of Calgary, Platform Calgary, others who've been doing this work for many years, were able to keep that momentum going until this government finally managed to see the error of its ways and begin to catch up. That is why we are saying this bill should be referred to committee. So we have the opportunity to review these concerns, actually talk with some of the stakeholders. Indeed, I would love to see the opportunity for some of these things. I want to make sure it's done right. The tech industry, this is one that the Minister of Advanced Education has specifically mentioned. He would like to see benefit from possible use of apprenticeships. Indeed, he has said there's no reason why occupations like coding or cybersecurity or ag tech and others cannot be taught through an apprenticeship model. And indeed, the government's own Innovation Capital Working Group has noted the importance of us training people here in Alberta and retaining those people who get that education and training here in the province of Alberta for our tech industry as an essential component. And in that report, they talk about working with post-secondary educational institutions and enabling greater output of technology and innovation graduates as being key to ensuring that Alberta creates the right conditions to support the work they are doing. They talk about how important it is for Alberta's post-secondary institutions to have the ability to increase graduates in technology fields. Now, Mr. Speaker, of course, our government had invested in creating more post-secondary spaces so that we could get more graduates to fill the jobs that these companies want to fill. And indeed, if we are working on attracting more tech companies, and indeed some of the ones that had been courted, as my colleague from Edmonton, Beverly Clearview, like Infosys, have indeed carried on and beginning to establish, and we need to continue to generate graduates who have those skills. This is one way we could potentially do it. But there are real questions about whether the way the government is approaching this, and indeed creating a broader new system. The government says they are bringing this forward to reduce red tape, but they are also creating now a whole new system within government, new committees, new registrar, new other things. If we are setting up this whole new infrastructure, we want to make sure we are doing it right, because again, I do not see that this government has a great track record on that front so far. Now, of course, in their report, the Innovation Capital Working Group also said that they encourage post-secondary institutions to expand program development in areas of technology and broaden the reach of entrepreneurial thinking in programs more generally. In fact, they do, in fact, talk about internships. They say increasing funding of internship opportunities for graduate students and postdoctoral fellows. So in this case, they weren't calling for additional internships. They just said, we would like to see the government invest a bit more. They call for about $5 million invested into an existing program, MyTax, nonprofit that's funded by the federal and provincial governments. Now, of course, we know this government has not had a very good track record of partnering with the federal government to take advantage of dollars already on the table to benefit Albertans. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of ideology get in the way, but here is an opportunity right here. So again, I think this is a good reason why we might want to have the opportunity to take this to a standing committee for discussion by referral. And indeed, the Innovation Capital Working Group, in talking about this need and this area where the minister is saying he was once interested in pursuing internship, they talk about it being essential that there is partnership with post-secondary institutions. Indeed, with this particular program through MyTax, indeed talking about the need for graduate students and postdoctoral fellows. So masters and doctorates, Mr. Speaker, which this government is making it increasingly difficult for young Albertans to afford. Therein lies a good part of this question, and another reason why this should go for referral, Mr. Speaker, because this government wants to open up all of these opportunities. How are these opportunities going to be accessible to many of the Albertans that have the skill, the talent, the ability, but not the funds? And there's increasingly wide numbers of Albertans coming from marginalized communities, and dare I say, racialized communities, which are disproportionately missing from areas of technology. When this government is allowing skyrocketing tuition rates, not even allowing, Mr. Speaker, they are causing. By the dollars they are cutting from our post-secondary institutions. I have 3 of them headquartered in my constituency. I have a 4th that has a presence, the University of Alberta, plus virtual campuses. So I hear about this from the staff, I hear about this from the students. If this government wants to expand opportunities for apprenticeship, it does not work if they are simultaneously making it too expensive for a large number of Albertans to actually participate. That is another opportunity that we have for discussion on this at a standing committee through referral. I absolutely respect the trades, Mr. Chair. My father was an electrician. He worked hard to support our family, and I was proud of him for that work. He went through a trade school in Trinidad. So unlike what the Associate Minister of Red Tape Reduction might want to suggest, I don't look down on the trades. They fed my family.
I'm called by the Honourable, the Associate Minister of Red Tape Reduction.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, 29HI&J, imputing false motives. Mr. Speaker, the honourable member knows full well that I did not say that, and he needs to apologize and withdraw his remarks. No, I did not.
The Honourable Member for Calgary McCall.
That's not a point of order at all, Mr. Speaker. That's all.
Anyone else have any submissions to be made? I am prepared to rule. Is this for submission or?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I clearly heard the Associate Minister at various points suggest that the Alberta NDP, of which I am a member of that caucus, indeed viewed the trades as being less than a post-secondary education. And that is to what I was referring.
I don't have the benefit of the blues, and I'm not entirely sure what the Honourable Minister, or I am unable to recall the exact words that the Honourable Minister used, but I would suggest that this is likely a matter of debate around whether or not people take particular positions on certain issues, and I don't find a point of order here. The Honourable, having said that, and a caution that I also provided yesterday was that when we specifically refer to individuals, in this case the Associate Minister and what he said or didn't say, and not stick on larger policy type issues, this is the spot where we often wind up in the chamber, and so I continually encourage members to speak to the robust nature of legislation as opposed to specific policy positions that individuals might take. The Honourable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I was saying, I support the trades. They fed my family. I respected the opportunity that my father had to return to NAIT and get his designation as an electronics technician, and the work he then spent the rest of his career repairing equipment at the Royal Alex Hospital. Those are good and noble occupations. We support them. We would support a piece of legislation that is going to make that system better. We just want to make sure that that is in fact what this legislation is going to do. And given the amount of ambiguity is here, the amount that is being afforded to the minister to determine himself, the amount that is being left to regulation, we believe we should take the opportunity to bring this to a standing committee and have that full discussion. To have that check and balance on something that is going to have significant impact on many, many Albertans, indeed their careers. Post-secondary institutions, unions, all of the folks involved in making sure that Albertans can make a good and honest living through the trades. We want to ensure that that system is set up as best as it can possibly be. So that is why I'm in support of this amendment. That is why I thank the member for Edmonton Beverly Clareview for bringing it forward. And myself and my colleagues will make no apologies for making this amendment, or indeed working to try to ensure this legislation does what it says on the tin. That is our job as the official opposition, and that is what we owe to all Albertans who work within these systems, and indeed for the young Albertans who aspire, or indeed some of the older Albertans who are going to be looking at a change of career as our province faces significant economic transition. That's all the more reason, Mr. Speaker, for us to make sure we get this right. And it is my hope that we will be able to work with the government to accomplish that. And that we will respect each other's positions as we do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
29-2A. Seeing no one. Are there others? The honourable member for Edmonton Meadows.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my honor to rise in the House this morning and speak to the Bill 67, amendment to the bill, actually. To Bill 67, Skilled Trades and Apprenticeship Education Act 2021. Mr. Speaker, the apprenticeship program, and as well as the part of it, the industry designations, plays very important role in our society, in a way strengthening our economy, supporting individuals. So this program is an important part of our education system. That provide the mechanism to our province to attract and recruit the talent and provide those individuals opportunities to gain the next level of knowledge, skills, so that they could not only support themselves, their families, but also contribute to our society by providing their skilled knowledge in building infrastructure, specifically our workforce, schools, building schools, hospitals, in this case pipelines. So the importance of this program is very critical to our prosperity of this province. So the way it has been working also been very helpful to the individuals, to the way the people who could not complete their education during their regular schoolings, that they could also come back to the education system to improve their skills, improve their educations. And same time, they would not have to worry about going to schools to upgrade themselves or to choose between how they will run their household, families, worrying about putting food on tables for their children or running mortgages. I have live examples of many of those people working in skilled trades, how committedly they worked, and this program was there, and that not only helped them achieve the goal they wanted to achieve in their life, and also help their employers and the industry to move to the next level. And I also experienced from the industry, in way of feedback, the people who did not get the strong support or did not go through the completed the high school education for one or the other reasons, it was a great challenge for many to stick around and have a support they needed to focus on studies to complete these grades, to complete the apprenticeship programs they were in. So it also relates to the strong and accessible education system is critical for the success of the apprenticeship program we are running. I also wanted to mention, the existence of SAIT institutions like SAIT, NAIT, there would have been many more, and their continuous growth and competition, their inability to take all those applications coming in, the numbers of people on wait list, is a prime example of this, how the apprenticeship program, in a way, the technical education, important for our society and how it is serving to the very people of our province. So that's the other reason I think it's important. We are talking about the apprenticeship education in the House, but there are a number of questions around it. And that is why I'm supporting the amendment presented by my colleague. This time we do not need to rush. As much as we appreciate government's effort, initiative to bringing forward this Bill 67, same time, we believe that the thorough work and proper consultations with people related to the industry is needed. So as far as my concern to the designations, industry designations, I know there have been a number of concerns, including within me, like holding few designations. It has been a bit of a challenge for us to being able to use those designations, either stay on sometime monthly, heavy monthly fees with the related industries, or if you do not stay part of that, such an industry or the specific institutions that prohibits you from using the hard-earned achievements, in this case, designations. So there have been some issues. I know I've been hearing from the industry that I worked in. Their group of people would spend thousands and thousands of dollars to use those designations, but very minimum benefits to expect from it. So there have been issues, but the way the government is deciding, the designations program might be eliminated in this case if this bill passes. So that can have also very adverse effects on the lives of Albertans. The very examples from our neighbor province next to us, BC, that legislated the law that removed the requirement of the industry designations, did not really have one-sided positive effect for the majority of the people. So that also discouraged a lot of people. So not to move forward to update their knowledge and skills, that is important, not for themselves, because they can also add or, add into the, how I wanted to say, so they can also qualify for the higher wages, but also it is very compulsory for our society in this technical world. The technology is moving very rapidly on fast pace, that our workforce stays on top of the knowledge that we need to build this society in a way. They're working in constructions, number of other things. Also, that helps our education system and the generations to come. So what I'm concerned about it, some of the issues why they are eliminating the industry designations is this is not supporting the province eventually, and that is discouraging people, and that's no way helping them to prosper in their lives, and not somehow say that it's probably hindering or halting their capacity or potential to qualify for higher wages that would help them prosper in their individual lives. So the other thing, as I said, the apprenticeship program, we cannot, single this program out of our whole education system. So as my colleague from Edmonton Center with some specific references highlighted and spoke about those issues from the industry-related experts, that how the government actually need to invest more onto these programs. But on the contrary, we have seen even though these programs have been facing our education system, specifically the concerns I have been hearing from my constituents during door knocking, that was the prime issue in my riding. The cuts to the education system. Either this is a early children's learning, or it is our school system, or specifically the higher secondary education or post-secondary education has been facing historic cuts, at least since early 90s. So it has to go even long way if we decide today and we realize the importance of an investment into the education system to recover from those cuts the education system has faced. But unfortunately, the time we are going through under this UCP government, we have seen those consecutive budgets coming with heavy cuts to the education system, the research programs in those institutions as well. So number of staffs being laid off as the population is growing. There are more students into the school system, the more students in the post-secondary institutions, but those institutions are under stress and pressure that they have to let go some of the people right now they're working within the industry. Instead, in reality, they actually need more help.
Honourable member, Standing Order 29 2A is available. Seeing none, any other members wishing to join the debate? The Honourable Member for Edmonton Northwest.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I just want to say a few words in regards to my support of this referral motion. And as I said from the outset of my remarks with Bill 67, there's lots of promising ideas and direction here, and indeed it's part of a normal process, I believe, to revisit legislation and to improve it, and certainly that's especially relevant in regards to post-secondary education, because of course post-secondary is a reflection of our society changing, the economy developing and diversifying, hopefully, and different skills that people need not just for working, but for their life and their contribution as to our province and to our country as well. And so I think that there's lots of room to make changes. And indeed, I mean, I think there's lots of reason to suggest promise here with what the government has brought forward here today. The main questions, though, I think are fundamental to whether this legislation will actually be successful or not. And so by taking a pause to look at the following questions in referral, I think it's probably a prudent thing to do. And so these are some of the issues that we need to deal with in regards to this bill, in regards to post-secondary and this apprenticeship training program. Number one, I said it before, I'll say it again, are we making sure that apprenticeships get the pay that is associated with the work that they're doing? This is fundamental to people participating in apprenticeship programs, in journeyman programs and so forth. It's how you reach and retain individuals to get the training and get the work experience and get paid for that at the same time. If there's any deviation from that system, then you will have a decrease in participation and a decrease in training and retaining a workforce here in the province of Alberta. And this is connected to this idea within this bill, which again shows some promise in regards to expanding what we consider to be an apprenticeship program. Right? When we think of it, we normally think of, perhaps plumbing and pipe fitting or electricians or whatever those skilled tradespeople are doing outside the chamber right now, right? Making that loud noise. They have an established skilled trades program that, perhaps there's apprentices working out there now. They're getting paid for the work. They'll go back to a place like NAIT or SAIT and get some training, and then you have a smooth transition and a valuable learning experience. If you take the pay element out of there, then suddenly the whole balance is shifted. And I just really want to make sure that we have that reassurance that that's not going to happen. Let's say we move a new apprenticeship program into something like technology, right? Or, health services of different kinds, right? To make sure that people are not being shortchanged on that apprenticeship program. I think that's absolutely essential, and that's why we need to answer that question in a much more explicit kind of way. We need as well to make sure that we are ensuring that the standards that exist in a skilled trades program, the standards that cross provincial boundaries and international boundaries, that those are being respected as well. If we in any way deviate from the standard that is observed, let's say as a Boilermaker, as part of the international standard for a Boilermaker through all the provinces and territories of this country, but also through the United States and even Mexico as well, then again, we are putting ourselves at a compromised position, and the workers that train through our programs as well. So again, I know that a lot of skilled trades, they are a bit reluctant to speak out more explicitly about this, but we're doing that here now, right? That's our job to do as the official opposition. That's our job to do as constructive critics of bills to make sure that they are functioning for the best interest of everybody in Alberta, right? So again, very important detail that we are maintaining the standards on trades as they are set, and the standards that are set throughout all the provinces and territories and the internationals as well. The trades want reassurance around that. Another area that trades definitely want reassurance around is the inclusion of training programs that exist in-house in our trades programs across this province. Lots and lots of skilled trades have invested considerably in training programs and physical facilities that allow for in-house training of electricians, carpenters, plumbers and pipe fitters, a whole range, insulators, a whole range of skilled trades that you can learn and apprentice through NAIT and SAIT, but also using the in-house programs that those skilled trades have built for themselves. As I say, actual physical plants that exist in Edmonton and Calgary and other places around the province, and to make sure that those are being used and valued as an asset to help train apprentices here in the province. This legislation shifts a lot of power from established institutions like the Apprenticeship Training Board to a registrar and to the minister's office. And whenever you had a categorical change of power and responsibility, for example, the minister has the power with this change, this bill, to disestablish any program at any time. Now, that's a tremendous, Madam Speaker, a tremendous concentration of power. And, you know, of course, we would presume that people will use those things in the best way possible, but it could also be used in other ways as well. So again, we need to make sure that all of these other issues are dealt with, because this is a categorical change in the framework by which trades are taught and administered as well. There's a lot of transfer of power from the Apprenticeship Training Board, for example, and, you know, people are nervous about that because, of course, you know, that has been the way that, you know, power has been shared, and responsibility and wisdom and experience has been shared here in the province for an awful long time. And you want to make sure that that is honored and respected moving forward as well. Like my honorable colleague from Edmonton Castle Downs talked about, you know, people want to make sure that they know that they're being taught at the highest state and level of professionalism in any given trade that they do, be it the insulators, carpenters, electricians, right? You name it. You want to have that professional standard being recognized and certified right through not just the students, but through the teachers and the programs as well. That brings up another point, of course, which is that to make sure that you're setting the curriculum, the word of the day around here, the curriculum of each of those trade programs to the highest standard and making sure that it conforms to both the very highest provincial standard, the national standard, and international as well. The curriculum and the standard of practice of what people need to know in any given trade is evolving all of the time. And if people are putting good money and time and effort to study for those programs, to that curriculum standard, you want to make sure that that curriculum is top-notch and it has an oversight that comes from the profession, right? We saw how that can go off the rails here in Technicolor over the last few weeks and months in regards to the K-12 curriculum, right? You don't want to follow anything that resembles that with the curriculum that is being taught for the trades. Fair play. I don't think anybody, that seems like common sense to me, and that's what people want as well. So that's where we're at, Madam Speaker. We, like I said, we had some good words to say about the idea of the evolution of our apprenticeship training program and how it integrates with our larger post-secondary education system. We know that it's absolutely essential to invest in post-secondary at this juncture in our history, now more than ever, that to diversify our economy, to retain the young population that we have in this province, to make sure that we're sending a sense of hope and optimism for people, not just to get a trade and get a job, but to start a family, put down roots, and build community here in the province of Alberta. That's what post-secondary can do for us. And, you know, quite frankly, this government's said a lot of very mixed messages around post-secondary education over these last 2 years. 3 budgets taking $690 million out of the post-secondary education system from the previous government, which happened to be us, to today. It's resulted in thousands of job losses, lots of programs being dissolved. It's put an existential question on some of the colleges to even exist, quite frankly, you know? And people take notice of that. Not just the person who lost their job working in a trade school or a college or a university, but the public too, right? You make choices around where you're going to live, you make choices around where you're going to invest, and you make choices for the best interests of your kids. If things look like they're compromised in terms of post-secondary, that's enough of a reason for people to move, quite frankly. Move away, right? Because we do these things for our children, for our next generation. So, you know, let's turn the ship around. I think we can. Building a strong version of what post-secondary can look like, investing in it, right? You can't just say, oh, we're going to build a brand new trades program and we're going to cut at the same time, right? Those are two conflicting messages. The message has to be clean, it has to be unified, and thus, with this referral, I think we can move forward, have an honest and authentic way to accomplish those goals. Thank you.
Standing Order 29, 2A is available. Seeing none, any other members wishing to speak to Amendment REF1? Seeing none, I will call the question on Amendment REF1 as moved by the Honourable Member for Edmonton Beverly Clareview on behalf of the Honourable Member for Edmonton McClung. All those in favour of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. No. The amendment has been defeated. We are back on main bill, Bill 67. Are there any members wishing to join debate on second reading? Seeing none, I will call the question. Honourable members, the Honourable Minister of Advanced Education has moved second reading of Bill 67, the Skilled Trades and Apprenticeship Education Act. Does the Assembly agree to the motion for second reading? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. So carried.
Bill 67, Skilled Trades and Apprenticeship Education Act is now read a second time. Committee of the Whole.
Answer questions that were raised